Hello all and welcome back. It's time for another Q&A because you asked it. I'll answer it. All right. So, I just want to go through and answer your questions because I want to make sure that things work well. What wood is more resistant to humidity, cedar or spruce, as far as the top wood? They will both take up moisture equally, but the cedar is a more dimensionally stable type of material. So across the entire span, you are less likely to have a crack occur on a spruce guitar rather than a cedar guitar. That said, cedar is also prone to cracking if there's an internal flaw in the wood, and I tend to find that there's more internal flaws inside of cedar than spruce. So to answer your question, cedar is a more stable wood in terms of the overall dimensionality, but it potentially could have internal flaws. Most places have really good ways of doing quality control for that. All right, next question. Do you have different bracing patterns for your cedar and spruce guitars? No. Kind of. No two guitars of mine are braced exactly the same. They may be similar, but each one gets bracing, and then I tune and listen to the piece of wood itself. So even to answer your question in a more specific manner, do I use the same bracing even between spruce and spruce? No, because each piece will be different. They're very similar, but very, very minor differences. And, the other part is I'm a human. I am not a machine, and I'm not using a whole bunch of pre-run out stuff. For example, my bracing stock. And this is what I will glue onto the top itself. But I do a lot of modifications from here to the final product. All right, question next. How do I see the longevity of cedar tops? Much like a spruce top, they will last forever. There was a period in the 60s that the cedar was being kiln dried, and that was from a production standpoint, not from a luthier standpoint. So, and they did not know how to properly kiln dry it because the kiln drying was a relatively new process at that time. And at that point, a lot of the lignins in the wood would get cooked out because of the excessive temperature, because they're trying to treat it like spruce to kiln dry it. Now they know better, where they don't kiln dry it for the most part, or if they do, it's at such an incredibly low temperature with a vacuum. It's effectively not much higher than room temperature. What's the longevity? Well, I've seen plenty of guitars and violins from the 1600s and 1700s that have had a cedar top, and they held up just fine. The big question is not how long do they hold up, but how long can you maintain the quality of the instrument? Next question. What do you think of 19th century guitars? Do you consider any of its features work better than the modern guitar? I think that 19th century guitars were a really, really cool idea. And it was a really interesting bridge between the Baroque, very oblong, elongated type of guitars to the modern guitar. Do I think that there's any features that work well? I think that the features that work well on some of the older ones are like the Germanic ones. And I guess I should back up and say there was many different types of 19th century guitars, because you had your Scherzo style guitars, or you had your Spanish, which were more like the Baroque guitars that were elongated, and there was just a varied number of bodied outlines that gave the different appearance and sound. So we have to be very clear. Like the old Ramirez that I have, that Brandon Aker played and is at the Shrine of Music, National Music Museum in Vermillion, South Dakota. Those were both. That's a 19th century guitar, very different from a Scherzo. So I'll keep this discussion to the Scherzo because that's more of what the thought is. One of the features that I really, really like in that Scherzer style guitar is the bolt-on neck, because you can do a lot of action adjustments and playability adjustments from the neck itself while maintaining the desired amount of torque above the top, which is a big problem, especially like on Simplicios, where people will want to raise the action because they were never designed to have a high action. And they will put a saddle on because it's really, really easy. But over time, it really makes the top curve, which is less good and can cause permanent damage. So for a Simplicio, for example, to maintain the proper amount of torque, you actually have to refret it and completely change the geometry of the fingerboard, versus the 19th century bolt-on neck from a Viennese style guitar, where you can just give it a little, and or if you want to pull it back, you can take off the neck and put it on a shim. So very, very cool, very, very cool technology, and there's some people who do it. I've built a couple guitars that way. Ultimately, I think that they're fun, and they're a perfect fifth guitar. And you know, the original style ones are far more affordable than you would think, and I'd rather have an original than a modern reproduction. I say that as somebody who makes modern reproductions of that. So, from No Way Joey, what is your favorite combo of woods for a modern classical guitar as a builder? Goodness. That's like asking me which is my favorite child. It's, whichever one is behaving best for me at the moment. For the most part, I tend to like Western Red Cedar with Brazilian Rosewood, just because I like the crispness that the Brazilian will give, and that sweetness, along with the sonority of the Western Red Cedar. There's other cedars out there that work really, really well. And the way that I like to build, I feel like my spruces can get a little bit more brilliant, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I've always liked a sweeter tone more than the big, loud, brilliant sounds. So that's just a me thing. But that said, I'm working with some Swiss Moon Spruce that is just absolutely gorgeous, and I really can't wait to get that guitar done too, because it's so beautiful. So, my answer currently is Brazilian and Cedar. Ask me in a month or two, and it may be Spruce and Brazilian, and it depends on what it is, and ultimately, what woods do I like? Whatever woods sound good for the pattern, Hausers sound interesting with Cedar. Do they sound better? No. The Fletas, I think that they sound interesting with a spruce top. Do they sound better? I don't know, but I like them all. So there's your non-answer. What woods work best? Whichever works best for that instrument. All right, next. What's your approach to voicing the guitar? How do you deal with wolf notes? My approach to voicing a guitar is up and down, and then left to right, which is a very weird way of putting it, but I guess this back is not voiced. As you can see, I cut a fairly consistent random outline, which is a very weird thing to say. But what I'll do is I'll hold it at this node, and I'll tap essentially across and then up and down. And what I'm listening for is a good cohesive tone where, it doesn't change in sonority from left to right or right to left. And it also is fairly consistent from top to bottom, but that's different. And then I will check this nodal pattern, which is here, and then tapping across here again. And because of my randomness, the consistency of my randomness, it's kind of baked into my head, in addition to what does the wood feel like, and, what does a brace tap out like, and what does each brace sound like. So I kind of keep a mental Rolodex of each of those pieces going together, and if I know that one piece is going to be a higher pitch, I understand that that's going to be a stiffer piece, so maybe I'll take that brace down a little bit if I want to control that stiffness. And I'll shuffle that around like on a top. Maybe I want more along the grain stiffness versus across the grain stiffness, and I'll use that information to place my bracing on the top. I don't use any tone generators. I don't use any, whatever's, oscilloscopes or fancy glitter or whatever. I mean, it's very impressive to look at, but I can't say that it's made a difference for the better within the guitar community. It's something that's impressive to look at online. It's impressive to show your clients, but I don't know. It's not something that I find is worthwhile. But talk to your local maker. Maybe they have a different opinion. I'm not a big fan of it. Marshall, I have a question about wolf notes on a classical guitar. What causes a wolf note, and are there any fixes? Wolf notes occur when you have an overexcitement within the structure itself. So that could be a number of factors, where you have too much torque on the top, so you are imparting too much of the string energy. It may be that you have an internally broken string, and if you are constantly changing your strings and then stretching them out by pulling on them, you may be consistently breaking your strings. And actually, I've dealt with that with several of my clients, where they like to stretch out their strings, where they grab it around the 7th fret and then yank at the 15th fret, and they developed a wolf note, or what manifested as a wolf note. Now, in my training as a violin maker, we were always taught that, believe it or not, wolf notes are a good thing, because that meant that the instrument was a very good instrument. When I had the opportunity to play on Stradivariuses and Guarneri del Jesus and other really, really fine instruments, they all had a wolf note. And what you had to do as a player was work around it. And there was several instruments that I played, like one of them that had a wolf note on an F sharp, and it was so bad that the bow was actually getting kicked off of the string, and so you would have to, push that note slightly sharp or slightly flat. And the best example of that is Jascha Heifetz. If you listen to his later recordings on a Stradivarius, people always say, "Oh, well, Jascha Heifetz can't play in tune." It's like, well, no, he can. He's actually just playing around a wolf note on his violin. And so, as a guitarist, you don't necessarily have the luxury of playing around the note itself, but you have the ability to change the tuning. So, I guess my point being is, you might want to use like a little bit of like clay poster tack to find where the overexcitement is after you reevaluate the way that you change your strings, because a lot of players will do that in terms of breaking the inner cores through the stretching process. So take a piece of clay tack and put it around on the guitar, around the top, and understand that you should never ever leave it there. What you are doing is trying to add a little bit of mass to figure out exactly where that wolf is coming from. After we make sure to rule out your frets. Different discussion. So if you have that little bit of clay tack on your guitar, you can take it to your local luthier and say, "Hey, can you please, maybe tack a little bit of wood that's exactly this mass under your top on the inside," and that should eliminate it, because that's what those wolf tone eliminators are on cellos. It's a tunable weight to calm the hot spot down. But that is a lot of how you play, because that could be technique dependent. How do the fan frets change the sound? Okay, fan frets have several problems and several benefits. One of them is that your first string is nice and easy to play, where you do a lot of your bigger stretches. Uh, Negative is your sixth string, it's a lot longer, so if you have to do like a 1 to 6 fret stretch, you may not be able to reach it. But more importantly, the fan frets can change the sound because of the way that the string vibrations bounce off of the saddle and the fret. Meaning they want to direct the vibrations to one side more so than the other. And actually, if you look at it under a modern LED light or a fluorescent light, you can actually see the vibrations on the other side of the string more than the shorter side. So it's directing very strange things inside of the string, which it wasn't necessarily designed to do. So you tend to get a little bit of a weird resonance sometimes. And you have to listen really, really carefully. It's not like it's something that is majorly there. The other downside is that you're going to be operating with either too little string tension or too much string tension, because unless you're buying separate packs of strings, because the first string is typically around a 635, 630 millimeter, something like that, and then the sixth string is typically around a 660 or something in that neighborhood, depending on how you want to have it fanned and where your concentration is, be it around the 7th or 12th fret. So you have those kinds of issues that really crop up. When you have that really, really short scale, you'll actually need a higher tension to get the mass of the string in the right area, or the right ratio, so it doesn't sound weak. So you're looking at a medium or a high tension string or a super high tension. But if you use that on your bass strings, where you're dealing with a 660-ish scale, you are going to be over tensioning that. So you have, basically you're going from under tension to over tension on one scale. And then, more importantly to me, I have a hard time handing a fan fret guitar to somebody and saying, enjoy. And then they look at it and go, well, how do you play this? And it's like, well, 6 strings and frets. It's like, yes, but the frets are in the wrong place. And I guess finally, this is now a technique-driven answer. You have more of a chance of playing out of tune, but also gives you a chance to do more correction with the fan frets. Because if you push the string sideways, a lot of players, whether you're conscious of it or not, have a tendency to push down and then up. So as you do that, you can actually lengthen the string and flatten the note inadvertently. So I have had more people come in with their fan frets saying, hey, I'm having a hard time getting this thing to tune up. Can you check the math on this? And I watch them play, and unfortunately I have to tell them, it's like, no, the math is actually right. The problem is with your technique that is causing issues. So those are the sound aspects that can occur with a fan fret. As you can tell, I'm not a big fan of it. I have worked on them. I have, I do see them quite a lot. I think that it's a very unique proposition, and I think that it has its place within the electric community and the bass community, especially on these multi 9, 10, 14, 16 string instruments. That's fun. But within the classical guitar community, I think it's adding a complication that isn't quite called for. Although that said, if it works for you, let me know down in the comments. All right? So, thank you so much for joining me on this. I do want to continue answering your questions. Please keep leaving them. I really appreciate them. And for $500 off my a new build from me, go ahead and use promo code YouTube on my website. Any of the products I spoke about, they're down in the links. And please subscribe and send this to somebody that you want to annoy, I guess. See you next time.